Welcome, Nina.
Welcome,
Thank-
Nina.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet everyone. I have a quick question. I'm on my phone, which I was able to access the Zoom meeting readily, but when I'm on my laptop, it's asking me for a meeting ID. Is there one? Otherwise, I'll just stay on my phone.
The other option, did you click on Woody's email link that he put in?
Yeah, so I
Oh.
got in just fine on the iPhone, but somehow my iMac is asking me for a meeting ID. That's no problem. I can manage on my phone. I've done many a Zoom meeting on the phone, so I'll figure it out at some point, maybe for future meetings.
Yeah. I've got another technical issue. I can't get my video to work at all, so we're both challenged tonight, Nina.
Okay, yeah, and while we're in progress, I'll see if I can rectify this situation here.
Nina, try, do you have something to write with?
I'm sorry?
Do you have something to write with? I can give you
Yes, I do. Yeah.
867.
Hang on, though, not quite there yet. And then I just managed to do, okay, 867, yeah.
9853.
Oh, my pen is not doing too well. Hang on, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. Oh, this isn't good. Hang on, I gotta get a better pen. Sorry about that. Anyway, please resume business. I'll be right back.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Kevin.
Okay.
Good to see you.
I know Robin is going to attend. Sarah said she's not going to be present. And Simone thought she probably wouldn't.
Yeah, somebody emailed, right, and said they weren't going to make it.
That was Sarah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Recording in progress.
I'm gonna leave this. I seem to have gotten it.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Oops. 2 times is a charm.
Great.
Perfect.
All right, I think we've got a quorum, so we might as well start. Should we do a roll call at the beginning? So Cam?
Present.
Wait, before I do that, Kevin, do you mind taking notes again? And then during this meeting, we'll designate someone as a permanent secretary.
Sure. Yes, not a problem. Let me just call up my notes from the last time and I can just keep on going from there.
Take your time.
Yeah, and maybe Woody, this might be the appropriate time to just indicate that I had a conversation with Simone Azevedo at Janet's suggestion. And she is interested and willing to serve in that role, taking the minutes. So I would suggest we take that up when she can be here in person at the next meeting, hopefully.
Next time. Okay, so roll call, Cam,
Present.
Janet,
Present.
Marty,
Present.
Nina,
Present.
Kevin,
Present.
and I'm present. We know that Simone and Sarah are not available. Cam, I haven't heard anything formal from Melissa yet. Have you?
No, I haven't either. I suppose we should reach out to Felicia and see if she's heard anything.
Okay.
The other thing, Woody, perhaps before we get going, the minutes that we approved last week, did they get submitted through or not? I know Peter used to do that automatically after the minutes were approved.
I don't believe so. So let me check on that.
Yeah, we could do that later too. I'm quite happy to help there.
All right. Okay, so the first order of business actually is acceptance of the meeting minutes from 10:09. Did everybody receive them?
Yes.
And are there any corrections, additions, comments?
I forget, did I send them out to the group after last week?
Yes, you did.
Oh, okay, all right.
I think so. At least I got it.
Yeah, I know I sent them to somebody. Maybe it was the whole group.
Did everybody receive the minutes? Janet, did you receive them?
Yes, I have.
Okay, I must have just done everybody then.
Great. So any suggestions, comments?
So the minutes, just a few things. Members in attendance includes the jurors, so that probably needs to move to others, right?
Oh, yes.
And then Sarah's last name, I believe, is Kinney.
All right, hold on here. 16th. Let me just call up that copy again. I'm sorry. All right, so that was the October 9th. And then so move jurists to others in attendance.
Yes.
Yes.
And then what was the last name?
Sarah Kinney, I believe it's Kinney, correct?
Okay,
I'm not
sure.
100% sure, actually. It just looked different.
Yes, it is.
It is EY.
And was anybody absent last week? I didn't
Is Melissa considered absent?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Melissa was considered absent and Nina was considered absent.
Nina.
what's
Correct.
Melissa's last name?
Herman. Hermann.
And Nina.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? And do I need to publish them somewhere or?
We submit them to Felicia, the town clerk. and
All right.
She'll post them.
Yeah, there's just few spelling, the typos that we need to adjust.
So Janet, do you want
Hold on.
to?
Let me send a request to share here.
So Cam, or not Cam, Marty, when you talked to Simone, was she gonna look into the AI debrief for taking notes? Or did you not have a conversation?
Was she going to look into what, Janet?
AI debrief to record and type up the minutes for us?
We didn't speak directly about AID brief, but we did talk about AI and the use of that, which she's
Okay,
willing to investigate and see. We didn't speak specifically about that product.
that'll be great because it'll save us a lot of time.
Yeah, if it's fully developed, I think was the concern.
Well, I think somebody still has to review it, but it stops, it saves us from time from having to type it up while we're having the meeting.
Okay.
So I see a typo on page 2. The second last line of the second paragraph unanimously is missing an N and an A.
All right. Did I get that one? There we go. Let's see.
There's an additional I in liaison.
Yeah, departments, okay. This is across the board. Let's ignore that. This is needed publicly. Okay, I think I got them.
Great. Yeah, those look like all the ones I identified.
Okay,
So if there are no additional corrections or additions, I get a motion to approve.
So moved.
So, and a second.
Seconded.
Cam,
Aye.
Marty,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Kevin,
aye.
Nina, you weren't present, right? So great, and I vote aye.
Okay. So
If you can just send me the corrected copy, I'll get it to Felicia.
okay.
Kevin,
Sure.
just quick question. Does juries go on both members and others? Or does he needs to
Oh,
come
no.
out?
No.
Good call. Okay. All right, so I'll save that and send to Woody.
Yeah, great.
All right, now let me close this one out, because that's the 9th. Here, I will make this the 16th, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll fix this as in real time here. Who's absent today? It's Sarah.
Mhm.
Sarah, Melissa, and Simone.
Simone. What if she pronounces her name Simone?
Sorry.
Okay. I'll get their last names. And then we've got, right, Cam, Nina, Janet, Marty, Woody, Kevin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Get rid of Juris.
7. Jurors. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who am I missing?
Me.
Nina
Yeah, me. Mhm.
and
Robin is others.
Robin. Sorry. Okay.
In the
As other.
Robin goes under others.
Oh, under. Okay.
We love having the new member do this because it's just so much easier.
Sure. Okay.
Terrific. All right, you can take that offline and stop sharing, and we can go back and go through the rest of the business. So,
Okay.
the second order of business was discussion of orientation for new members, and I thought it would be worthwhile talking, particularly because this year we've got a significant number of new members, and even our old members, for the most part, have just joined in the last 1 or 2 years. I thought it'd be worthwhile talking about orientation, about the process, what would be helpful, and what kinds of things people think they would like to learn more about. Maybe we could get some of the older members to talk about what they think would be helpful in terms of orientation. Janet, do you want to just take a stab at what things you found helpful learning about the committee, and what things you might think would be helpful to the new members?
Can I say mature versus old?
Yeah, mature. Thank you.
So even though this is my 6th year, I still feel like deer in the headlight. Other than understanding the memo part. That's pretty much about it. I think it'll be very helpful if we can actually go through the annual meeting, how the Blue Book's put together in advance, kind of giving an education of this is kind of what we went through last year and help kind of understand the process. Because I had no clue what was going on first couple of years.
Great. Cam, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, perhaps following up on what Janet was saying, I think it's very difficult for us to give you a sort of a checklist of things you need to know to understand all the processes we deal with. And so I think in general, the advice that I got when I first joined 6 years ago was just accept that you're going to be sort of a little bit uncertain for the first few months at least, and don't be too worried about that. Ultimately, after perhaps the first year, you'll really understand what the end-for-end process is. At the same time, I think it would make real sense for us to sort of think through that. Woody, what those elements are that would help people right up front, because I think at the moment we've done that very informally. And the other thing is the suggestion that we might have a meeting of sometime in the not too distant future of what went well last year and what we can do better. And I think that would help us frame for the new people some of those issues that people felt lost on. And I'd also suggest that Marty have a shot at it, because he's also a relatively new member, and the new members tend to sort of have a much closer connection to what they didn't know when they got to the organization. So I think that would be helpful too.
Yep. Robin, you have a comment?
So I have an offer. I talked a little bit to Mike Blanchard, and one of the things we felt went well last year, although it happened much later than how we wanted it, was pulling together the entire budget so that the Warrant Committee could look at things holistically. Otherwise, it makes it very easy to approve every ask when you don't know what the total is. So 2 things. One, the town of Dover is committed to providing the first draft of the total budget January 1st, with the understanding that that will have placeholders in it, but at least it will give us a sense of where we're ending up. Secondly, we also thought a really good way to understand municipal accounting, to understand what your role is, what you're trying to approve, what we're trying to get funded, would be for us to take the final budget last year, and at one of your meetings, Woody, pull together a little bit of a training, just, some of the lingo, like what a debt exclusion is, things like that, because we thought that might be helpful to the new members. So at least it will put everything into perspective. So to the extent you feel that that's something that would be helpful, Mike, Carl and I are willing and able to pull together that sort of training presentation.
Oh, fantastic.
That'd be great. Nina, Kevin, do you have things in particular that you're looking for?
I think actually explaining the definitions and the lingo jargon type stuff would be really helpful to me, having no substantial experience with budgets at all, other than an office that I used to run, which is very small. So
Great. Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, some of the materials that were sent around in advance, I did find helpful. Even going through that two-pager that you sent, you know, kind of line by line with folks who know what was on there. That was the what was the name of that document? Oh, municipal finance notes, right? So I found that pretty helpful to go through. But you know, I did have some questions about that. I think that had some of the definitions in there. Um, you know, like Cherry Street charges and things, you know, things like that. Like what exactly is that? But it kind of gave me an idea of where the different you know, the sources of revenue and the you know, and the sources of funds and the use of funds. There seem to be a lot of exceptions. I guess that would be helpful for me to understand what the exceptions are. Um, uh, versus just general kind of budget process.
Okay. Marty, thoughts?
Yeah, I think Robin's suggestion of being able to see that budget in totality, the draft budget in January, and working from that and seeing that, you know, we're seeing all these elements coming in one off, and then suddenly at the end, something appears. It would be great to know how that fits into sort of the initial thought process as we try to evaluate whether a particular request is reasonable or not relative to the entire budget. I also think that if there was a willingness on the part of Carl and Michael to do a training session based on last year's budget, that would be extremely helpful relative to the, you know, you, in addition to that two-pager that Kevin mentioned, you also circulated that very lengthy Mass Municipal Association guidance, which I find pretty dense. And I think that, I guess the other comment you had shared this past week with everybody, the fact that the Mass Municipal Association is sponsoring a one-day session. And I noticed there's one or two sessions there on budgeting and budget principles for municipalities. And I wonder if it might be helpful for the newer members, including me, to attend that. I think it's Saturday, November 2nd.
Yes.
I don't know if other people had thoughts on that or if you want to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I think I sent around the link to the meeting page, which is so there's something called the Association of Town Finance Committees, which is a subgroup under the Mass Municipal Association and is all open to all the warrant committees and finance committees in the state. Our function is similar to finance committees. Our analog in Sherburne is actually called the Finance Committee. But the group has been relatively quiet for the last several years during the pandemic, but it seems to be getting active again and is having its first annual meeting in several years in November 2nd. And the morning session, at least, seemed as though it might be useful to people. The first set.
Is that online, Woody? It's like a webinar?
No, it's actually in person
Oh.
in Sharon.
Ah.
And I think the meeting will last from 9 or so in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. I'll send out the link again, but there is a session in the morning called Finance Committee and Budgeting 101, which is to go through kind of basics of how municipal finance works and what the role is of a finance or warrant committee. So as Marty said, it's something at least to consider for people in terms of additional background. And then I think starting with having Robin and Carl and Michael do a presentation and go through last year's budget would be a great way for us to both review kind of how the committee has functioned in the past, but also introduce the new members to what town finance is, particularly some of the issues that the town itself is facing or faced last year and is almost certainly going to face again this year. And then talk about a little bit about what our role is in terms of the way the budget is developed and brought forward to town meeting. So I thought we could start with that, and then with that as background, maybe start to think of other specific topics that might be ones that people want additional background on, such as municipal debt or Prop 2.5, or how the school budget is different from the rest of the budget.
How about capital budgeting as well, Woody?
Capital budgeting would be another one I thought that would be great. You should know that there is a specific capital budget committee, but that reviews and kind of passes on capital requests, but the warrant committee also sees those requests as part of the overall budget. And Cam and I both are sitting on the capital budget committee as representatives of the warrant committee. The other thing just should note is that school budget is distinct from the rest of the budget. It's got some special features, but I think in Dover the school budget last year was 52%. Cam, is that correct? Of the overall budget.
I don't really know exactly. I'd have to go back and look at it.
52% here. It's actually slightly higher in Sherburne. So it's a significant amount of what we generate as a town and what our expenses, what our taxes go to. So it's something that we need to be aware of and be conscious of and thinking about as well. So there are a variety of things like that I think might be specific topics we could get into.
And just a quick question on that. I'm still a little unclear because does the warrant committee not really have a say in the school budget, or do we not make recommendations to the selectmen about that?
So the selectmen don't govern the school budget. The school committee sets the policy, and it's their responsibility to review the budget. You know, I guess one could say ultimately the town, if the town doesn't have the money to fund the budget, then we need to go back to the schools and say, you know, we just can't fund this increase, and then we have to work with them to find ways to close the gap. So the school budget, it's really important to get that pretty early on. You know, the contracts are defined so that their payroll and benefits are basically set, and that represents close to 80% of their budgets. So you're playing with very little disposable amounts there. But you know, I think Woody, it's probably not a bad idea to reach out to Dawn, the business manager there, and say that, you know, we're pulling together the budget. We're going to have the first pass of the budget January 1st, and we need her to provide us with her first pass of the budget as well. You know, understanding that it's going to change, because that's a significant piece of
Yes.
of our budget.
Yeah, it has a big impact.
If I might interject a little bit there as well, the school budget is decided independently of any other committee in the town. But having said that, we have an expectation that they present their budget to the Warrant Committee and to the Board of Selectmen, and make themselves open to any comments that we have as they're developing that budget. My experience has been that often the schools change their budget plans on the basis of advice that they've received from us, and I think that's very useful.
Okay,
But,
so
but
it sounds like-
ultimately, it's between the school committee and the selectmen directly.
Well, it's this, there isn't really a direct link in a sense, you know, statutorily, the school committee is responsible for the budget of the schools. Ultimately, because it rolls up into our budget, if we didn't have the funds to pay for it, the selectmen would go back to the school committee and basically say, you know, we don't have the funds. And, you know, I served on the regional school committee, and a number of times Sherborne came back the 11th hour and said, this budget, we don't have the funds for the budget. You need to cut out X hundred of thousands of dollars. And we needed to find ways to do that.
Okay.
So it's really, you know, statutory, this is part of the issue. You're juggling a whole lot of balls that you don't necessarily have direct control over.
Right.
So that's why the sooner you can begin to pull together the full picture, rather than coming down to the wire and then saying, well, you know, we can't really approve this anymore. At least we will get a sense of the totality of what the increase is in the budget and where we think we need to end up. Because everybody's going to ask for everything. You know, I thought your guidance letter was excellent, but I still think everybody's going to ask for everything. You know, they're going to ask for every position. They're going to ask for increase in consulting. So that's why it's important to pull it together and then to understand the components and what those new asks are. And that's where, you know, the liaison role on the Warrant Committee becomes important, because it's the liaison's responsibility really to work with that department or that committee and really understand the ins and outs of what's being asked for, so that the Warrant Committee as a whole can kind of have conversations about, you know, what should our recommendation be? And I'm going to sit here as the selectmen's liaison, you know, and we'll listen to your conversations and also then go back to the Board of Selectmen and hopefully get a vote so that I could provide you with better guidance. But it's an art. And there'll be a lot of back and forth. And my personal goal would be trying not to come down to the wire and there being a crisis. Like last year, I think March, we figured out the budget there was a 10% increase. And then we had to scramble to bring it down. You know, it just wasn't going to fly. So.
Well, this actually is a nice segue into the role of the liaison. And again, maybe it would be useful for current members to talk about this for the new members. Cam, do you want to talk about what the liaison job is?
Basically, it's the communication that the liaison person becomes the communication point between the committee or board or whatever they're liaising with and the Warrant Committee. And so I feel that we have a responsibility when we are liaisons to really pay attention to what's happening in those various departments and boards and committees. And it doesn't mean you have to attend every meeting, but it might involve, for example, reaching out to the head of that board, committee, or department and establishing a relationship with them and getting an understanding of what their budgetary plans are and what issues they're facing, and to feed that back to the Warrant Committee so we get some heads up on issues that relate to budgets. I think that's a really important element of that communication. And we did try to step that up last year. It's difficult at times, as you're just one individual reaching out. You often, particularly if you're new, you're not sure how you should interact with those boards, departments, and so on. We cannot tell them what to do, but we can ask for an understanding that we're trying to pull together an understanding of the broad budgetary issues and constraints that we're subject to, and that it would be helpful if they would make sure we had the heads up on those issues. And typically I would recommend that people actually go to meetings where financial issues are being discussed. I think that's probably the critical part.
Marty, you want to comment as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've only gone through it once last year for the 2 or 3 groups that I was assigned to. And I found it helpful to introduce myself, actually go meet with that person that ran that particular department to really understand what the issues were and how they view things. What are the concerns that they have? What do they think they're doing real well? And I always would like to understand how do they reach that conclusion or judgment? What kind of data might they have that says this is how you run the library, this is how you run whatever the department might be? For the budget cycle we're in currently, what are the issues they have there? What are the pressing needs? What are the kind of would like to have, and what are those things that they might not need to have anymore? So that there's some broader thinking about it as opposed to it's just an incremental exercise. You know, I got this much last year. I probably need a little bit more on top of it. How do you assess that what you're doing is the best way to do it? And are there any ways to improve? And do you have a network that you kind of are always checking in with at bigger or smaller places? Or is it just we've always done it this way and move along? So I think there's a lot of value for the individual members of this committee to do whatever they can to establish that communication channel and encourage them when they come before the committee to talk about that aspect of things, as opposed to here's the budget submission and this is what we had last year and this is what we'll have for next year and here are the variances. I think it would be helpful to this group, and I think it'd be helpful to the town to better understand, you know, how much of ownership does the particular department lead or director or whatever the title is has in terms of the ownership and control issues that they have over what's going on, and do they have sort of an outlook of where they want to be going forward. So that's my approach, and that's how I would do it.
Janet, thoughts?
I mean, I had relatively easy assignments. So the ones that I was liaison, they usually had a very specific ask that they were justifying. So it was actually easier to follow in that I could tell that there's a need and therefore they're asking for this amount of money, and that was easy. I think the tougher ones were where things were just level, and so there was nothing to really talk about. And I think one challenge I had was sometimes finding out who to talk to for specific liaison. Some are not as obvious as others, where I can just go to dovermass.gov and find out who's the chair of the department. Some of those assignments weren't as clear, so I could get some help on that this time around.
Yeah, I think maybe 2 things. One is that I think through the interactions with the committee chair and the members, and by attending the meetings, you can get a sense of how the committee is functioning and what their where they think their needs are how they think their needs are evolving, and sometimes you can actually talk to them in a way that to help them kind of sharpen what they're thinking about and uh, be more kind of proactive about how they anticipate their needs evolving. I also think that it's town government gets much less active during the summer, obviously, but I think as people develop liaison relationships this fall, you should assume that it's going to be your responsibility for the next year until we reassign things next year. And that means paying attention to stuff that comes up even during the rest of the year. Sitting in on meetings, kind of communicating with the chair, getting a sense of how their work is progressing. And thinking critically about how they're going to be evolving their budget requests, because ultimately that's what we need to know. We need to know what goes into their budget and what are they looking at the big picture? Are they kind of anticipating what the town's needs are going to be going forward? Are they realistic about what their demands are going to be? So the more interaction you have with the chair and the members, and the more you're paying attention to kind of how their committee work is progressing, the better off we tend to be. So I'm gonna send around a list of what the potential assignments are, and then I'd like people to just email me back with what their requests might be, and then I'll try and sort things through and see if I can come up with assignments for the coming year. As Janet said, some of the town committees are pretty simple. Their budget requests are relatively straightforward, often don't change much year to year. Some requests are large and kind of really complicated. The schools, for example, is a huge kind of work in progress over time that you need to really stay on top of. All right, any questions?
Woody,
Yes, and
can
it
we-
might be helpful, Woody, to, sorry, Janet, go ahead.
We may be thinking of the same thing anyway. Just planning the schedule of who's supposed to present when. Having that sort of in advance also may help the department to plan ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought we could go ahead and have a schedule similar to last year in terms of having presentations. I have to talk to Michael and Robin about how they think things will evolve, and when it seems appropriate to start getting people to come in and talk to us. I think the process will be somewhat different this year if we actually have a budget at the beginning of January that we can kind of respond to. And rather than having people come in and do their presentations and having us vote on their requests, it may make sense for us to have them come in and do their presentations and then hold our vote until some point after we've gotten all the requests in place, so that we're looking at the total picture rather than funding schools or DPW in isolation. So it's something that we can think about and talk about. But we talked last year briefly about the possibility of having one or two marathon sessions after the first of the year, in which we actually vote on the different proposals once we have a better picture of how the pieces fit together.
So I did speak a little bit to Mike, and he said in most towns, and I think you're aware, Sherborne does this, is the budget review is done in 1 or 2 meetings closer to the open hearing. So it allows you to have, you know, better data. He said Dover was the only community that he's really seen that spreads it out as much as we do. And I think that's part of the problem, because it's so, some of the budgets are reviewed so early in the process that you know, you have to go back to them later. So I'm wondering if it makes sense, and I'm just thinking out loud here, you know, you will get the detailed budgets, and maybe somehow it becomes more of the responsibility of the liaison to understand better what that budget is, and then do a more informal presentation. I think probably 80% of the budgets are really easy, because to Janet's point, they don't change much. It's identifying the departments that are going to drive the big increase in the budget, and figuring out how to review those. I don't know if what I said makes sense or not. Because the issue is, it's just, you know, if you do DPW really early, in my experience, it's the budget you're going to look at in January is going to be very different from the budget you're going to get in March.
Yes. And the same is true for the schools.
Right, right. Because it has to go through, you know, a vetting process that doesn't just include the warrant committee. So it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So you have to know what's in the budget. You have to understand what's being asked for. We have to know what the total impact of the increase is.
Robin, I think it's a great idea to approach it that way. I would go so far. I mean, I think the model of maybe having a meeting on all day on a Saturday and going through all the budgets at once after we've got the sort of proposals for the budgets, and really relying on the liaisons to sort of help drive the presentations, if not actually engage in the presentation itself. But I think that would enable us to shorten down our cycle a lot. It would involve a lot fewer meetings for us as a warrant committee.
Right.
And it would give us time to think a little bit more strategically, and not just sitting waiting for the next 2, 3, 4 departments to present their budget to us.
Other thoughts?
Robin, when do you think would be the best timing if we were to do that type of a 1-day or 2-day review? Is it February or March?
So I think it has to be before your open hearing, right?
Yes.
So it needs to be before the open hearing.
So people who are new to the warrant committee might not know what the open hearing is. So basically, it's the opportunity for town residents to hear the budget too, and to ask questions about it of the various department heads who are there, and so it's an important milestone, and we actually call that meeting, not that we're active participants in it, but we listen very much to the citizens' comments as well, because it helps guide us before we actually make decisions about the budget.
So based upon that, Cam, then the vote should occur after the open hearing, but a full review of the budget should happen before, so that you kind of get a sense of what potentially warrant committee's recommendations are going to be, and what issues are going to be the hot buttons for town meeting, and then that's typically validated or we're surprised at the open hearing.
Right, correct. No, I fully agree with that approach, Robert. And we often really get surprised by what the hot button issues are. At the last town meeting, there wasn't a single question about our budget. So clearly, we're either doing something right, or people had just fallen asleep by the time we got to the vote. But I was really happy that we'd honed the budget down and made clear presentations of what our positions were on it, and it seems that the residents accepted that, which I think is great, and we should aspire to keep doing that.
Right, and I think fundamentally what worked really well is showing them, well, we started out here, we ended out here, you know, these were the compromises that we made to bring the budget down. And that gave residents confidence that we weren't just rubber stamping everything. And that was the first time we had really done something like that. And again, I think that model, the summary model that we pulled together made the budget made it more understandable. You know, it simplified it to a level that people could understand rather than presenting the minutia. So Cam, I like to think we did a really good job, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think, and of course, most of that preparation work was done by Robin, so
No,
she
I don't
deserves
think
most of
so.
the praise.
You know, it was a team.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes, and Michael and Carl were very important in that process as well.
Right.
Is there like a printed schedule that everybody's kind of marching along to that would just kind of?
That's what we've typically done as part of the guidance. So basically, the guidance letter was really structured by in different levels. Firstly we had the guidance letter itself, then we had the liaisons, so the departments know who they're going to be talking to from the Warrant Committee, and then we often had a schedule. But I mean, given this notion of changing from a sort of successive nights meetings and having it just in a much more compressed fashion, we might want to withhold sort of a plan on that until we've got a better feel of how we're going to approach that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Other thoughts? So just to remind Kevin and Nina, what we're doing is reviewing the budget that we get from various committees, town departments, the Board of Selectmen, and then we're kind of reviewing them, interacting with those people, and then eventually we're making a recommendation to town meeting about whether or not to approve. Ultimately, we don't decide on the budget. The town meeting decides on the budget. But we are we're kind of the representatives of members of the town and of town meeting so both in terms of kind of providing a reaction to the budget and also eventually to making recommendations to people who come to town meeting about how they're going to vote.
Right.
We can give feedback in a way that is not really possible at town meeting, and have interactions with people around the way the budget evolves. But ultimately, what we do is make a recommendation to town meeting members as to whether or not they're going to accept the budget.
Right. Yeah, well, I certainly wouldn't, I mean, I wouldn't want to spend a lot of cycles reviewing preliminary budgets if it changes, if there's a significant delta between the preliminary and the final, I would just want to wait till whatever the final was, I guess.
Yeah, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and less meetings is always music to my ears. So
All right, great. Any other questions, comments? So I'll distribute a list of different liaison positions, and then I'm happy to entertain people's requests. I don't guarantee that you will get what you want.
Woody, one other thing that might be worthwhile is changing the format of that liaison table to add in the contact person,
Yes, great.
and then maybe ask Felicia to fill in those names from, you know, the various department heads and so on,
Yes.
so that then it's much easier for the liaisons to know who they've got to talk to.
Yeah.
Because I think Janet's point was a very good one.
All right, great.
You know, so with the contact, but also the who covered it last year. So either make an intro or give us some background information to whoever's taking over will be helpful as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Although we've had such a large turnover this year, it's
Oh, that's true.
it's probably not quite as useful.
Right, you're right.
The other thing is that historically what we've tended to do is give the easier assignments to the newer people. So those departments where we know that they're not likely to be really contentious, so that you can find your sea legs, as it were, in the first year, and then maybe to progress to more challenging assignments after that.
Well, I mean,
I was actually thinking,
Or-
sorry.
I was just gonna ask about, in general, like, is the culture around this, are like people like, you know, when they see the warrant committee walking down, all like our doors slamming, or are they welcome to us participating? Like, what do people get a sense of?
I mean, the feeling I got was actually the members were looking to us for guidance on how to present it so it will get approved.
Ah,
So generally, it's actually a really good relationship.
okay.
So, but to Cam's comment, I was actually thinking, since it does take a while to get, develop the relationship and get to know the process, I feel like the newer members should probably start with the hardest one.
Oh, wow. Jump in the deep end.
Yeah, with the help from the departing members. I don't know.
We won't know the difference.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Like, you volunteered to take the note first day.
Yeah.
I think Nina was saying, speak for yourself, Kevin.
I think in the,
I almost feel as though you need to make sure that the workload is properly spread, and it's hard to know what that's going to be until you get the whole budget pulled together, in a sense. Like, we do know the schools is a heavy lift, so if somebody has the schools, and if they're really gonna do it right, that should be all they get. But they could get all the information that they need by, connecting with either a member of the school committee or with the business manager. I think DPW historically has been a heavy lift, and I think that might be the case again, because they are going to most likely be asking for additional headcount, as will the library. So those are assignments that you shouldn't give two of those to one person, because
Right.
it's just going to, if you're gonna do it right, it's gonna be a lot of work. And then you, Kevin, Nina, you may ask, well, what kind of a time commitment am I going to need to make? And I would say, on average, maybe 1 to 2 hours a week at the most. I think it's important to establish the relationship with the liaison to make sure that you're up to date with what's ever going on, and that you can report back to the warrant committee on, you know, the status of the budget. And I also, I just keep harping on this, but I think having the whole budget really early on will help you put into perspective what may need to get cut, and then help provide better guidance to a department that you're serving as liaison, and say, you know, I know you think this is really important, but is there a creative way that you may be able to do the same thing? Because there are a lot of asks this year, and we're probably going to have to prioritize.
Other questions?
Because it's hard to say no, and everybody, you know, they just have to have this, you know, they're just not going to be able to survive without the 3 additional heads. And
Right.
Pickleball courts.
right, exactly. The town will not be able to survive without spending $1.2 million on one pickleball court. But you know, it's once you put everything into perspective, then it sort of makes even the selectman's job easier, because you can go to Park and Rec and say, if you absolutely think you need to have these pickleball courts, you're on your own. But we just want to show you how it fits in with the total picture in the budget. You know, so do you want the road repaired or a pickleball court?
Right. Right.
Or do you want your taxes to go up?
Right. And nobody, you know, and that's the thing, we try very hard. Well, I think it's been 20 years since I lost override, and I would like to keep it that way. And we've managed to maintain excellent schools and, you know, provide some additional services, get a community center built, you know, and that's, and now we have to pay to maintain some of our buildings and infrastructure. So it is a tricky time, and we're gonna have to make hard choices.
And yeah, and so are you saying, or is the goal hopefully in January? In other words, will we have like, okay, here's what we expect the revenues to be, here's all the budget requests, and then we just start horse trading?
Exactly.
Okay.
But at least it gives us a sense of what to horse trade on.
Right.
And you know, within those numbers, there's certain things that can't budge, like
Right.
salary increases and things like that.
Right.
But there's certain things that you know you can do some negotiations on.
Yep. By the way, I played on the outdoor pickleball courts last Saturday morning too. You know, I think the compromise was like for $600, they put up a few nets and painted the courts, and we're off to the races. So
Seems to be getting used quite a bit too.
yeah, so that was good.
So they did that on the tennis courts?
They did it on the basketball court over in Carroll Park.
The basketball court
Wow.
So
now has three
three
pickleball courts
now.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to do it on my driveway once we redo it.
Yeah.
I figure, I think you could do it. I mean, there's probably enough room.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but yeah. So until we pull, because there's some big capital items coming on this year, you know, and again, everybody throws everything on there, and Barry, chair of capitals, like, oh my God, we're gonna have to spend like $7 million this year. And then, you know, there's a whole bunch of horse trading and asking, do you really need this? And then we try and get grants. And so.
Yeah. I was going to ask for a little more in the guidance letter, those two, it says, you know, after a number of years of postponing capital replacement, a number of expensive capital purchases are coming due. Like, what are they though specifically?
So we
Yeah, we do actually meet with the capital budget committee during this process, and they will explicitly tell us what they are.
Okay,
But a couple of the big ones we know coming down the pipeline are fire engines, for example, and those things cost 1.2 million, 1.5 million each. And so for a small town, that's a big hit.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Right, I mean, the other big thing is the state changed the regulations around culverts. And
Oh yeah.
we had to spend like $2 million fixing the culverts because of the stormwater regulations changing. You know, the Claybrook Road was very expensive to repair. The salt shed behind the highway garage had to be repaired. We kind of lucked out because we had a flood in the highway garage. And so insurance paid for all the offices being redone. It's really nice in there. They have really nice conference rooms. I mean, I was amazed when I went in there. You know, so we're good there. But the protective agency building is a time bomb. That's the police and part of fire. You know, there's sections of it that are pretty nasty, and I would think that there's going to be requests to fix that building.
So one of the early kind of background things that we could do potentially is have Barry Goldman come from capital budget and discuss
Yeah, that would be good.
the way
Right.
capital budget works and the 5-year, we have a 5-year capital plan. And you can go through that because it shows kind of how the town's capital requests fluctuate from year to year, but some years like this one, the amount likely to be requested is going to be substantial.
Right. You know, the other thing is, for years, we were so proud of ourselves, we never replaced any of our trucks. So we have an extremely aging fleet at the DPW, and nobody wants to be a mechanic anymore. So it's hard to find people to repair them. We're getting to the point where it's very difficult to even get parts. So the time has come that we actually have to begin to replace some of those trucks.
Yes, we've got fire engines that are 20 years old, 24 years old, and the same with the DPW. They've got trucks
So we
that are
have dump
very old.
trucks, right?
Yeah.
Like
It's
we have a snow plow truck, a plow truck that was used in the 1978 blizzard.
Blizzard. And one of the problems was that we have maintained them very well over the
Right.
years, and they look so good. Everybody says you need to replace that truck because it's got a nice and shiny, and everything is been maintained, but you can't get the parts for them.
So are there capital replacement reserves that the town sets aside certain amounts, or is it just as they pop up, you need to figure out how to pay for it?
No, one of Robin's great achievements was to get us to start building reserves. I don't think that we're quite where we need to be with those reserves at the moment, but we're going in the right direction, right?
Right. So one of the things that I felt strongly that we need to try do is professional asset managers have replacement reserves. And so I was looking at it, and you can't have a replacement reserve, but you can certainly have a capital stabilization fund. And actually, one of the things we had figured out how much we needed to seed the capital stabilization fund so that we wouldn't have spikes in the tax rate. But it got voted down. Right. Well, people did it. They felt that we were asking for too much to be seeded you know, not really comprehending how much capital we had coming down the pike in the next 5 years. So instead of contributing an initial amount of $2 million, what was contributed was 600,000, which wasn't nearly enough. So the capital stabilization fund has money in it. And as part of our strategy to try and stop like big spikes in the tax rate, we also said every year 1.5% of the operating budget should be allocated towards capital. So you should use that to pay for what you need, and then any excess should go into the stabilization fund. So we are trying, but we don't have nearly enough right now in that stabilization fund.
And on the issue of fire trucks and dump trucks that are 20 and 25 years old, I assume Kevin probably has data on, you know, what is the average life of these kinds of assets?
Yes,
How much
yes, he does.
And it's
Right.
far less than what than what we've been driving them for. And you know, one of the things at town meeting, if you recall or not, but we did hire the mechanic full-time. We were using a part-time mechanic because we were afraid of losing him. But he's gonna retire in 2 or 3 years, and Kevin is just deathly afraid because you cannot find mechanics.
Yeah.
You know, on that pickleball issue, or the pickleball court, I wasn't aware that they had adapted the basketball courts to satisfy that need from last year. And in some ways, that kind of forced creativity, I guess, and
Right,
solved the
exactly.
problem. It'd be wonderful to understand the detail of how that all worked from the time we said, no, we're going to do it, to now telling us that it got done.
Well, so the approach of Parks and Rec was to get it from the town meeting and get it approved. And then when that didn't happen, they reluctantly dug into their reserves to spend the money to make it happen. We were trying to encourage them from the capital budget perspective to actually do that first, and then also look for grants. So you can go to the town meeting and say, hey, we're contributing this much from our reserve funds, we're contributing this much from grants, and we're only asking this amount from the town to make it happen. And also another approach that the newer members might want to think about when they're liaising with the various departments. I mean, state grants are a big way to get funds so that we don't have to spend our taxpayers' money on
Right.
it. And so that's something that you really should keep in front of mind. Are they actually exploring the opportunities to the degree that they would be useful for the town? So yeah, there's lots of little things like that we have to remind ourselves to tell you about.
I was gonna, because I think that was Simone's comment on the or her feedback on the draft of the, you know, guidance letter that like town departments should look for, you know, best practices to raise revenues through grants. Does the town have a full-time grant writer?
No.
No. But I will tell you over, and we should pull this data together, because over the last 4 or 5 years, we have applied for and received a substantial number of grants. One of the things capital budgets took on themselves was, once we became a green community, capital budget really was aggressive about going out for grants. So Green Communities is a program by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that encourages, through grants, towns to get more energy efficient capital. And so we've been getting the maximum amount of grants that we can through the Green Communities Act. As we replace capital, there's also a couple of other programs. There's a program through the Mass DOT for road repairs, for culvert repairs. So we have been aggressively applying for all grants that we can. And usually the applications are put together by the assistant town administrator, the town administrator, or potentially a department head. One of the things we've been talking about is perhaps we could share a grant writer with another community, because in theory, they would pay for themselves, because there is definitely an art to applying to these grants.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's huge.
And,
Yeah.
and the other thing that we haven't really tried very much, but getting perhaps affluent residents to make us donations to get stuff done. I remember the playgrounds when they were initially built was financed that way, and so there are opportunities. If only we know how to explore them for that too.
All right, I don't want to keep this going too much longer, so let me push through the last few things. I distributed the guidance letter, gotten some excellent feedback. I'm happy to hear still from people their comments about the guidance letter, and then I'll send out a revised draft, and hopefully that can be it.
Woody, I know that the town, that Michael Blanchard and Carl are really looking to get that as soon as possible.
Yes.
So, I mean, Carl was pushing me to say, can we give it to them this week? So it's something that we shouldn't just defer to another meeting, I think.
No, I think based on the comments, if I don't hear anything more by Friday, I can actually finalize it and send it on. So reviewing the key
Well, I think we have to approve it as a committee before
As a
it can be
committee?
sent on.
Okay, so then next Wednesday we'll.
Yeah, maybe you send the draft
Can we approve things by email?
I don't think so, no.
Oh.
Okay, all right.
We have to meet.
All right, so we can approve it for in the final version on Wednesday.
Yeah, and you could send a draft to Michael and
Yes.
Carl so that they know pretty well essentially what's coming down the pike.
Yep. Key dates we talked about. I'll kind of work on trying to put something together for the next meeting. And then other business, I just Cam and I have been kind of involved in this for a while, but I did want to mention the fact that the Sherburne Finance Committee has some concerns about the way capital budget requests are handled by the school committee and by the schools. And I should say that the schools account for a greater percentage even of the Sherburne budget than of the Dover budget. I think it was 58% of their budget this last year, and they've been skirting with a Prop 2.5 override for the last 2 or 3 years. Their tax base is significantly lower than Dover's, but their cost for the regional schools are almost equivalent. They're very, very close to the two towns contribute very, very similar amounts.
It varies from year to year. Actually, it's based on the student population and where they come from, how much we pay proportionally.
Right, but the number of kids from the two towns has stayed relatively close. It goes up and down, and some years we're a little bigger, and some years they're a little bigger. But the total contribution is similar. So Sherburne anyway is and their finance committee is has been expressing concerns about the school budget. I think I'll send an email to the committee describing some of the background for this, not since not everyone is present today, but they have drafted a letter that they would like to send jointly with the Warrant Committee and the Capital Budget Committees of the two towns to the school committee, primarily encouraging greater transparency and communication around capital requests. So I'll send out an email describing some of the background. I'll give you a link to the school committee meeting that precipitated some of this discussion, and I will send a copy of the letter that has been drafted by the Sherburne committee that they're looking for us to kind of sign off on. They'd like to get it done relatively soon because obviously the school budget is also in the process of being prepared. So it'd be nice to deal with this over the next 2 or 3 meetings.
Yeah, I should add to that my feeling is that given the financial constraints that Sherborne is under, they're apt to be more aggressive in the messaging that they send to the schools, and I think the consensus that we've developed, Woody, up until now has been that we can't really tell the schools what to do, but we can ask them politely to be more transparent when they make decisions. And I think that's a win-win for both the schools and for us if we don't get surprised and start pushing back on budget proposals because we're afraid that once they're approved, they're going to be spent for something else.
And I also think that I think it's remarkable how effective our capital budget committee is in terms of reviewing and bringing in expertise around capital budget requests. And the school committee hasn't entirely availed themselves of that expertise. So persuading them to kind of communicate better with capital budget and have more of a dialogue around their capital requests, I think can only benefit them. In the long run, they end up making better choices about their capital requests. And that's respecting their independence and integrity. I do think that the school committee members themselves should need to be more involved in the financial decisions around the schools to pay more attention to it. And that also could be just better for everybody if there's just more communication.
Robin, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I do, you know,
I thought you might.
the school actually has a more robust capital system than the towns. And we actually leveraged some of the things that the schools do at the town. So for instance, the schools have, for the last 15 years, had professional capital needs assessments prepared. And they used the capital needs assessments to better understand when major replacements needed to occur. And they set a system up whereby, 2 or 3 years before that replacement needs to occur, they have been having professionals come in to make a determination as to whether does the roof really need to be replaced? Can we get more years out of the roof? So the town has actually mirrored the same system that the schools have had. What Sherborne is upset about is the fact that the schools used their excess and deficiency fund, which at the region, their excess and deficiency fund is akin to free cash, to pay for an overage in a proposal that they received for a new roof without going back to the towns to let them know what they did. And I think where the school is wrong is they should have gone back to the towns, but keep in mind that the school committee is really responsible for the budgets, and the school committees were voted for by the towns. So the schools did nothing wrong, but I think what we can ask is for more transparency when it comes to how they're going to utilize their excess and deficiency fund. One
But it
last
wasn't just
about
the
excess and deficiency funds, it cannot exceed 5% of the school's operating budget. So any amount over that 5% either has to reduce the operating budget at and this is only for the region, has to reduce the operating budget at the region, or it gets returned to the towns. So reducing the operating budget or returning it to the towns is the same thing.
But the other problem, Robin, was that we approved the replacement of boilers that they then decided after the budget was approved, after the request was made, the budget was approved, they then decided that they had another life for another 10 years, and so they could use that money as well for the roof. And that,
Right.
I think, was a little bit more contentious than using the excess and deficiency.
And
So I think that was something that did concern Sherborne a bit
Right,
more
but-
too.
But again, from a statutorily and regulatory point of view, they did nothing wrong. So I think
No,
all
absolutely.
the towns can ask for is a process whereby if this happens in the future, they will let us know. But I think it's really important that everybody understand if they decide this is what they're going to do and we disagree, they can still do it.
Oh, absolutely. But I think the problem was that the feeling that they made that change, which is a substantial change, and
Right.
didn't even let us know about it. They just did it. And I think as people who are responsible for the budget going forward, we really do have an interest in understanding those substantial changes. And I think that was where people started getting a little hot and bothered about it. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
we were never really informed of this.
No,
correct
and
me
I
if I'm-
think they were wrong there, but.
Correct me
Yeah,
if I'm wrong,
absolutely.
Ken, but I think the other issue was that they, this was around the air handlers that they were proposing to purchase. And their initial proposal did not involve electrification, which seemed like a mistake. And then their budgeted amount was off by 50%. Or rather 100%, which is a pretty substantial error in terms of capital purchases. So it suggested, however their process is working, it isn't without problem.
Well, they've gotten proposals just like we have, and yeah, I think we should ask them what happened, because typically, having sat on the regional school committee, there was always a proposal that we worked off of, or some kind of a feasibility study. So
Right, but during these periods of transition, going from fossil fuel based energy provision to renewables, a lot of the contractors are comfortable with the old ways of doing things, and so they're proposing things that that they've always done and are comfortable with, rather than going out and really trying to understand what the other options are. And so for that reason, I think the guidance letter suggesting that that they pay attention to that transition is really important.
Yeah. Well, let me distribute the letter that the Sherburne people have drafted, and that'll also fill in some of the background for people.
Yeah, I mean, I've just had my fair share of these battles with Sherman, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely are irritable.
Right, at some point I was summoned to a board when I was the chair of the regional school committee, and they told me I had to come to a board of selectmen's meeting that didn't start until 10 p.m. because they had an executive session. And then they wanted the budget cut. And, the increase in the overall budget was maybe 2%. But the problem was that they had more kids going to the school.
Right.
Oh, I was so aggravated at that point. I just looked at the chair and said to him, so you have a difficult problem. How are you going to decide which kids can attend the school? I mean, what are you supposed to do? And they miraculously found the money, and the superintendent was like, oh, you can't do this. I said, it's a big game of chicken.
All right. Unless there's other business people want to raise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll propose, yeah. And I
Okay.
apologize to everybody that I've been behind my ugly face over the whole night, but I can't get my video to work. So it's not because I'm trying to hide myself from you.
It's a handsome photo, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Cam, it took me a while to figure out why your lips weren't moving. So
Okay.
like, is he frozen?
I've had a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I
Aye.
raised my hand, by the way.
So I'll set up a meeting for next Wednesday night at which we'll vote on the guidance letter.
And then Woody, when do you want us to try get the training done by?
I'll email you, Michael
Okay.
and Carl, and because I think we could do it almost any Wednesday that you all are available.
Okay, all right, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Because I think sooner's better, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all
All
right,
right, great.
all right.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
everybody,
Thanks.
very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.